Snow crystals floated across the shadowed evening heavens, gentle yet unyielding, blanketing the deserted avenues of central Chicago like a hushed grief. The urban glow softened behind the descending flakes, and under a wavering road light a lady remained clutching her young son tightly against her heart. Her jacket proved too light for the bitter chill, her exhales apparent while she murmured tender phrases to soothe the shaking youngster. She had wandered for hours between refuges, each entrance either packed or locked. The darkness had deepened, harsher, and now she waited at the transit halt, uncertain whether the final ride would arrive. Her boy's cheek pressed into her shoulder, his tiny fingers clutching her garment, his tone faint and drowsy. "Mommy, will we head home soon?" She longed to answer yes, yet no residence remained. If you trust in compassion, fresh opportunities, and the strength of one generous spirit to alter another's path, then kindly press like leave a note forward this, and follow our page because tales like this remind us that affection can reach you even after losing all. Her name was Emma Reed, once a confident lady who served as a caregiver in a modest neighborhood clinic. Existence had never been simple, but she had succeeded in grinning through every trial, until one winter evening her spouse Lucas vanished without notice, abandoning her with towering debts and a 3-year-old lad named Noah. She attempted everything. Extended duties, reduced portions, ignoring her own wants to nourish her child. Yet the tempest of obligations expanded quicker than her bravery could sustain. Then arrived the removal order. She passed the following evenings on seats in lobbies, in sanctuaries that granted her only heat, not rest. Still through everything, she never allowed her boy to witness her tears. That evening she had traveled miles praying for a wonder, perhaps somebody caring enough to provide transport or a passerby's grin, to assure her the world wasn't entirely harsh, but the metropolis appeared too occupied to observe her suffering. She waited now beneath a transit canopy, flakes clinging to her strands and eyelids, her footwear drenched, her mouth quivering as she hummed a cradle tune. Across the roadway, amid the haze of road lamps and fumes, a gentleman observed her quietly. He stood tall, enveloped in a deep indigo wrap, his palms hidden in his pockets, his look impossible to decipher. He had lingered there for a while, awaiting or perhaps reflecting. The darkness ranked as his least favored moment, the stillness recalling all he had forfeited. A union, a household, and the sensation of being wanted by anybody. His name was Benjamin Cole, a 34-year-old designer who once possessed everything: wealth, a profession, a lovely residence facing the water, but nothing that seemed like belonging anymore. His partner had departed 2 years earlier, carrying their expected baby after a loss shattered their bond. Since then, Benjamin had strolled these identical paths nearly every evening, attempting to replace the quiet with urban noise. That evening, he wasn't expecting anyone, but destiny was. He noticed Emma first as merely another figure in the flurry, until he spotted the small lad in her embrace. The manner she draped her wrap around him, though she herself shivered. Something about that image, the silent courage, the fatigue, cracked something inside him. He crossed the pavement gradually, his soles crunching over new powder, his chest burdened with thoughts of what he might utter. She noticed him nearing and instinctively retreated, alarm flashing in her gaze. "I'm sorry," she breathed swiftly. "We're only waiting for the bus." Her voice sounded slender, breakable, like crystal nearing fracture. Benjamin nodded gently. "It's all right," he replied, his tone warm despite the freeze. "But I doubt the rides are operating anymore." Emma glanced aside, her mouth quivering as she fought to conceal her hopelessness. Noah stirred in her grasp, his complexion pale, his little palms chilly despite the mittens. She murmured tenderly to him, "It's all right, darling. Mommy's here." Benjamin's heart clenched. He could perceive the reality in her eyes, that she strove to remain firm for her son, that she bore the burden of a reality that never allowed her peace. For a moment neither spoke. The breeze roared along the vacant road, and a glowing eatery sign blinked across the way, its panes shining cozily against the icy darkness. Benjamin glanced toward it and then back at her. "Look," he said softly, gesturing to the eatery. "It's open. Why don't you both step inside just for a bit? Get warm." She paused. Faith arrived hard anymore. The world had seized too much from her to permit space for optimism. I can't," she breathed. "We lack funds." Benjamin's reply came before she finished. "I didn't request funds, only comfort." For several seconds, she stood motionless, holding her son, torn between dignity and need. Then Noah whispered in her ear, "Mommy, I'm cold." That proved enough. She nodded wordlessly, and Benjamin guided them through the powder. The eatery stood nearly vacant, only the aroma of brew, the hiss of the warmer, and the faint drone of an ancient music box playing something gentle. The server gave them a curious glance but said nothing. As Benjamin led them to a seat near the glass, Emma settled cautiously, her wrap still draped around her son, who was too weary to raise his head. Benjamin signaled for warm cocoa and broth. When the mugs arrived, the heat struck her palms like a blessing. She breathed a thank you so soft he nearly missed it. Noah sipped from his mug, his eyes brightening for the first time that evening. Watching him, Benjamin felt a peculiar pang, something between sorrow and promise, something he hadn't experienced in years. As they remained there, he discovered fragments of her journey, not through speech, but through the pauses between them. The worn boots, the shaking hands, the way she eyed the clock as if fearing time would vanish. He understood she was more than another struggling spirit. She was a parent battling a fight most couldn't fathom. After an hour, Emma looked down, ashamed. "We should leave," she said gently. "We've used too much of your time." Benjamin shook his head. "No," he replied kindly. "You haven't." Then, almost without thought, he added, "Where will you head?" She paused, her voice breaking as she answered, "We have nowhere to head." The eatery grew silent. Even the coffee maker's noise faded behind her words. Benjamin looked at her, and without hesitation he breathed back, "You do now." That evening, he drove them to his modest residence facing the city. It wasn't grand, just one sleeping area and a sofa, but it was cozy and the glow felt gentler than in years. Emma tried to decline, but fatigue and the sight of her sleeping child dissolved her pride. He spread covers on the sofa and offered her the sleeping area, but she insisted on sharing the sofa with her son. For the first time in months, Noah slept without trembling. Benjamin stayed awake late, sitting near the glass watching the snowfall, wondering how two strangers could feel so linked in such brief time. The next morning he awoke to the sound of giggles, the kind that fills a vacant home with life. Noah was dashing around the living space with Benjamin's old sports cap, and Emma stood in the cooking area preparing brew. She appeared different in daylight, still weary but vibrant. He realized then that sometimes the most shattered people carry the brightest glow. Days became weeks. Benjamin helped Emma secure a modest role at an old friend's office. He taught Noah how to construct block towers and prepared flapjacks every Sunday dawn. Slowly, the barriers that hurt had built around their hearts began to fall. Emma smiled again. Benjamin laughed again. The residence that once felt silent now rang with comfort and small moments of delight. Moments that wove two lonely spirits into something resembling kin. But mending is never simple. One evening, Emma found an envelope Benjamin had left on the counter, a note to his late partner, one he penned every year on the same day. She realized how deep his hurt still flowed, and instead of feeling apart, she understood him even more. The next dawn, she left a message on the same table. "Thank you for reminding me that compassion still lives. We may have nowhere to head, but now we have somewhere to belong." Months later, the first flakes of spring drifted across the heavens, gentle and slow. Benjamin stood by the glass watching Noah sketch on the pane with his finger, while Emma draped a cover around his shoulders. He looked at her smiling for the first time without grief in his eyes. They had built something rare, not out of love alone, but out of aid, honor, and promise. If this tale moved your heart, if you trust that even one act of compassion can transform a life, please press like, leave a note, and forward this video. Your support helps us share more tales of affection, empathy, and fresh chances. And before you leave, tell us in the comments, what's one caring thing someone once did for you that you'll never forget? Because sometimes all it takes is one person to pause in the flakes and say, "You do."